schedule. And this is a big report, which is good. Leaving time for questions at the end, but again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to jump in. Next slide, please. So this is just a high-level narrative of the scope of work. Stepping back a little further, you can see this project is really primarily about building and site infrastructure, as all of the phase 3 projects are. At Joseph C. Wilson, we also have a small addition. Again, it's really very much infrastructure related in that it creates a secure entrance and then a second addition for an elevator. So those things couldn't be accommodated easily within the building, so we're looking at additions for those components. From an infrastructure standpoint, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, we're converting the original building steam heating system. So again, this building was originally constructed in 1904 with major addition in 1935. Later additions had a hot water system, but the boiler plant in this building is a steam plant. So a lot of old steam piping, steam boilers need to be converted to water. We're also adding air conditioning for the student classroom and classroom student library areas of the building like that, which primarily comprise that 1904 and 1935 area of the building. I'll point those out when they come up. But all of these items kind of fit into that building infrastructure, whether it's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, architectural, really very much focused on the aspects of the building that need to be modernized to address the program in this building. Next slide. We'll start back when we go to you. Sorry.
Go there.
Sure.
Discuss with the board a little bit about the issue with respect to the roof here. And there's some unique aspects to that problem.
There are, sure. What the roof we're talking about, I mean, there's several roofs that are going to be addressed or replaced on this building, but the original building that was constructed in 1904, it's a fireproof building from the ground up until you get to the attic. And then once you get into the attic, the roof structure, which is a pitched hip roof, so you see the building from the street, you see, the shingles of that roof. The structure of it is actually wood, kind of like a large wood members, constructing with posts and rafters and purlins. So one of the infrastructure items that has been on the Rochester City School District's list for a while has been to take that wood out and replace it with non-combustible construction with steel. So the entire building, the 1904 building from ground to above the roof is now a fireproof structure instead of most of it being fireproof and the top attic part being wood. Is that what you're?
Yeah, and there's been some, as I understand it, there's been some deterioration in that roof structure already.
Yeah, I mean, the RJSCB Facilities Design Group is every year does a structural inspection of their buildings. They're constantly looking at them, and there are areas where some cracking has been identified. And when that's identified, they get an engineer up there, a contractor up there to fix it. That fixing has been to kind of to add more wood, maybe to sister or to put bolts in place and things like that. So the structure is being, I would say, repaired rather than modernized. The wood that was originally built is still there. Something happens, they notice a crack that needs to be attended to. They attend to it, and that's been an ongoing problem. It's been going on for some time. If you look back and speak to the Facilities Design Group, you'll know that they've been watching this, which we feel very good about the attention they're giving it. But what they're saying is this is really time with a modernization like this to try to address that. And the scope of the project is described in schematic design is to.
Yeah, the reason I ask you to do it is I think it's a good example of the kind of things you deal with when you're dealing with a building that was originally erected in 1908. And, that's the kind of thing you run into, the kind of things that need to get fixed. And it's not a small project, by the way.
Yeah, so, at the end of the project, what you'll see will look very much like what you see today from the outside. In terms of the classrooms, there's no classroom space up in the attic, so it doesn't really, provide new classroom space. But it really addresses a longstanding issue that has been identified, has been identified, so I want to make sure that's clear. But that's, we have an opportunity now to replace.
Thank you.
Steve, is that space also had supplementary fire?
The steel would be fireproof steel, yes. Or
No,
fire
currently.
protection, I think. Yeah, I should mention that the wood structure that's there, in addition to being attended to, one of the steps that Rochester City Schools took a couple of decades ago was to add a sprinkler system up there. It's called a fire protection system. That sprinkler system in an attic is what's called a dry system, so it's actually full of compressed air. And then if a fire is detected up there, the air blows out of the pipes and the water comes in. But it's dry so that it doesn't freeze in the wintertime, because the attic is unconditioned space. It's like, maybe think about the attic in your house where it's above the insulation, it's cold. So it does currently have a fire protection system. So there's the wood structure and the fire protection system. Those would be removed and replaced with a non-combustible steel structure and fireproof, spray on fire, or some application of fireproof. Did that answer your question, Roland? So, again, on this list, this is really kind of the nuts and bolts kinds of things that we're doing. Some of the more visible things will be the elevator and the security entrance that will also provide accessibility. This is a building where from the ground to the first floor, you have to go up about 3 or 4 feet. So we want to make sure we provide accessibility to people with disabilities to the front entrance. There's currently accessibility around the side. This addition will provide accessibility in the front.
Question, you mentioned the elevator and the security entrance. Are you extending the structure of the building, or are you going to build these two components within the existing structure?
Great question. So for the elevator, it's kind of a not funny, but interesting. There's an interior courtyard, so it's actually exterior space, but it's really the best location that we can find to put the elevator. So even though the elevator is an addition, but it won't be on the outside of the building, it's actually inside this interior courtyard, which is outside space. And then for the front entrance, if you go back, I think there was a picture of the front entrance, right?
Yeah, well, this is first.
Yeah, right here. I'm sorry, next, backwards to the agenda page.
There you go.
So what you're looking at here is kind of the walk into the front of the building. You actually enter in either one of these two entrances, which is on either side of the I'll call it an exterior courtyard. That's where the addition is proposed. The entrance addition. Nestled within the aisles of that exterior courtyard.
You need to pay some attention there, as you can tell by looking at this, how it looks. As this is a classic structure, it's important for the district, for the city, for that matter. So we don't want to. We get how we have to put an addition to accommodate the infrastructure, but we don't want to mess up the way the thing looks.
Yeah, for the
Take care of that, won't you?
architecture geeks, this portion of the building, 1904, was designed by J. Foster Warner, who was one of the 3 architects at that time. It's been identified as eligible for listing, so all of our work will be reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office in conjunction with the State Education Department. So yeah, we definitely will make sure we do a nice job there.
Would that entrance take away?
So I'll get to that in the floor plans, if that's all right. I could jump to that now, but I think I can quickly hit this project planning and then jump right to that, if that's all right, Jacob. So for project planning, I just wanted to identify that this is a building where all of the students are gonna, vacate for a period of time into swing space. The swing space that's been identified is at the Jefferson campus. And that's really all there is to say about it right now. We've kind of done a test fit to make sure that all the program, will fit. And that's the district building that's been identified for that swing space. Okay, so the next one the site plan. I apologize, it's a little bit hard to read here. North is to the right-hand side of the page. Genesee Street is to the bottom of the page. This, this portion here that I'm pointing to, which is towards the bottom of the page, is the location of that addition. So this diagram just kind of indicates that what we're doing from a site standpoint, it's pretty much reconstructing what you have, reconstructing parking lots, walkways that already exist, bus route that already exists. So we're not really adding any new site features, with the exception of making sure that the addition is accommodated with an appropriate sidewalk and arrival. Next page. This is the lower level. So as I mentioned, when you enter the building, you walk up lower steps. You can also go down, not at the main entrances, but there's also stairs down. So you're in kind of a basement. We call it the lower level. And this dotted line here at the bottom of the page is the location of the footprint of the addition. If we go to the next page, what you'll see is that where there are classrooms on either side, to the north side of the addition, so the purple indicates the addition or the entranceway. That color that you're looking at. To the north side of that or the right side, that's the nurse's office. Okay. To the left side is a classroom. And so there is one classroom that will have windows adjacent to the entrance. If you think of the School of the Arts, there's some rooms like that. If you think of School 16, we had some classrooms that then also shared and classroom windows into an addition area. So that's what's being planned for that classroom there. Right. All questions to that about the addition occupying those classroom windows?
I think, Steve, what's most important to the board is we are able still to maintain all the instructional interchangeable classrooms of the program with the addition.
That's true. And then the bigger the addition allows for one of those windows to be to the exterior for the required rescue window. Okay. So that's the first floor plan. If you go up to the second floor plan, I should have stepped back. So purple is addition. The other shades of orange have to do with what we're calling light, medium, or heavy renovation. The heavy renovation is primarily renovation where we're moving walls. The medium renovation is renovation where the walls and doors are staying where they are, but they're going to be replaced, modernized. So new floor finish, new finishes on the walls, new finishes in the ceilings. Most of the ceiling work here, is related to that mechanical work. So in order to do the mechanical work, we've got an electrical work, we've got to take out the suspended ceilings, do all that mechanical work, and then put the suspended ceilings back. These very dark areas, the darkest of the orange or brown areas are where we're making structural changes to the building in order to accommodate some aspect of the program. Most of them have to do with this elevator. We have to adjust floor levels so that the elevator will work and so that we can get in and out of the elevator. Also, if you've ever been in Wilson, one of the funny features of it is when you walk down the hallways from, I guess from east to west, that are adjacent to the auditorium, there's a pitch down, it's like a ramp, but there's also a pitch from side to side. It's just kind of an odd situation that was a result of this building and the many, many alterations that occurred over time. We're really trying to correct that so it's a proper ramp with a pitch in one direction rather than a compound pitch. We're actually really not pitch. It feels a little bit like a fun house in there. You kind of walk in and you kind of move to one side because the ramp is sloped. But we want to fix that.
Oh,
I mean, it's fine the way it is, but we're addressing it.
Steve, maybe you should go back just for a second to the lower level plan to show the connection of the elevator to the cafeteria and servicing the kitchen.
Yeah, that is a good point. So I mentioned the elevators in the courtyard, and that's correct until you get down to that lower level. We have to open up the ceiling of the kitchen area and raise that elevator down to the kitchen. One of the primary needs for this elevator, well, there's a few of them, but one of them is to get the materials, product and, everything that a kitchen needs in and out of the kitchen. So the kitchen's on the lower level. And it is really very challenging to, pull in a truck, break everything down off the pallet and carry it down to the lower level. This elevator is intended to address that. So the kitchen is one of the primary needs for the elevator. One of the other primary needs is the other classroom spaces in the building. You often need things to go to classrooms, whether they're cleaning equipment like a floor scrubber, or whether it's materials for a CTE class or a science class have to go up to the upper level. The elevator that's there is really not well suited to moving anything other than a couple of people around this building. So this elevator is really intended to better serve the entire building from top to bottom. That's the lower level. Next level, again, you've got an array of light, medium, heavy. One of the things I should mention as we're doing these alterations, we're taking the opportunity to make all of the classrooms as close to or above the New York State standard classroom size. This building has a lot of classrooms that are below the standard size, simply as a result of the year it was built, right? Back when it was built, the classroom standard was a smaller size. So we're able to increase that. One of the floors that shows that, so this wing to the north, today there's 5 rooms there. At the end of the project, there'll be 4 properly sized classrooms, then 1 small classroom for resource room or other pull-out space. So we're taking 5 undersized rooms and turning them into 4 properly sized rooms and a pull-out space, which is also needed. One of the main aspects of any program today is you need a variety of space sizes. So you don't need large classrooms for pull-out functions like maybe it's ESL or maybe it's some kind of an intervention. But if you don't have a smaller room, you deliver that program in a larger. Then you've got smaller classrooms and you're putting more kids in there than is appropriate to not appropriate, but it's better to manage in a full-size classroom. So that's one of the things we're taking advantage of this modernization to do.
Distributing those pull-out spaces Steve just referred to, they are required as part of the individual education program for special needs students. They have to be approved by the regional associate. So it's not just extra space, it is program-driven space. And I want that to sound.
All of the spaces in this building are for program purposes that we identified when we created, or when the model program was created for this building. And as William mentioned, some of the interventions or therapies, whether it's an OCPT or speech or some other math or ELA intervention, or oftentimes they'll do English for speakers of other languages as a pull-out. It really depends on the needs of the students and the way the program is delivered. But there's a need for full-size classrooms where there weren't for full-size classrooms. And there's a need for, 400 square foot spaces where there weren't 400 square foot spaces. And we've been able to take advantage of our plan to lock that in. Okay. Guess we'll go up one floor. Second floor, third floor is a little bit more of the same. One of the unique features of the third floor is that's where many of the science rooms are. So we're going to try to reinforce that by modernizing those science rooms, which are located on the third floor. Stop there if there's any questions. So that would be schematic phase completion. Okay. As Rob mentioned, or as Tom mentioned, we just completed the schematic phase. I do need to report that as of today, the schematic design estimate is over the budget, but a lot of work has been done in the past couple of weeks to reconcile this. The program manager, the design team, and our CSD have been meeting and will continue to meet to discuss the prioritization of ideas that will bring the scope and the estimate, within, the allocated budget. Once that happens, we'll be submitting these plans to the New York State Education Department. That, of course, is one of the, one of the features of this program. There are several submissions, but the schematic design submission is an important one, because that's when they're going to calculate, you know, all of the room uses, all of the room sizes, and agree or assign a building aid unit calculation to this building. They want to make sure that we hit the mark on the schematic design. One of the things we as designers say about schematic design is, after schematic design, we really don't want to make any more big changes. You know, maybe you move a door, maybe you'll fix, you know, the arrangement of the parts in the space, but you really don't want to be moving walls or moving rooms from one side of the building to the other after schematic design. So schematic design is a point where you kind of lock in, this is the floor plan that meets the payment. Budget's been reconciled, these are the room uses, these are the room sizes, and this is what's what we're going to move forward with refining from this point forward.
Why don't you share with the board the what the building aid units are, how they're calculated, rough terms?
I didn't bring the specifics.
No, I don't want the specifics, believe me, but
But
just trying to show that they appreciate how important this is for the process.
Yeah, as they look at the room uses, and there are certain room uses, this is a secondary building, so it's grades 9 through 12, right? State Ed considers secondary as grades 7 through 12. They have a way of calculating building aid units for 7 through 12 buildings, and it's based on what the room is used for. It primarily assigns kind of a factor to every room that's used for the delivery of instruction. So that includes a general classroom, it includes science rooms, art rooms, music rooms. They get a little bit to libraries. They actually, in this case, in secondary, if a building is large enough, they'll give some building aid units for the auditorium, gymnasiums for the physical education program. So they'll add all that up, and it gives a number. They'll also look at whether or not the room is used for self-contained special education. So one of the things your board has probably been hearing about are the ISR plans, or instructional space review form plans. Those are the plans really that identify all of the spaces within a building that are used to deliver special education programs, in particular those spaces where students are receiving special education instruction in a self-contained setting, as well as all of the related services. And that's reviewed by the district at the district level, and it's also reviewed by the what's called a regional associate level. So there's kind of several steps of review. What I think happens is state education wants to make sure that if a room is shown on a plan that's intended for use for special education, that it's more than just one person saying that's what we're going to use it for. It's been reviewed at a variety of levels. So that at the district level, at the regional associate level, and then that's what gets submitted to state ed. So they give different building aid units to different types of rooms, go through a formula, much like your tax return. It adds all up, and it creates a number of building aid units. That number is multiplied by a cost factor. That cost factor creates what's called the maximum cost allowance. So this is really the phase where, you know, we've been calculating that internally throughout the strategic planning process. But once it goes to state ed and they confirm that, we'll be able to say, yes, these are the building aid units. This is the cost allowance that we should expect for this project.
So unlike a project in another set of circumstances where the schematic phase itself is not unusual, you know, I mean, you would be doing a design, you would be doing the estimates we're talking about. Do you have enough money, and are you getting what you need? So that's a standard process. But in this school construction, there's an additional process that's going on right now, and that's this building aid units. And it is very important because it dictates the level at which the state is going to support this project. And remember, we have some requirements about the percentages that we need to design to, 95% at least reimbursed. So we need to make sure we keep whatever we do here we get enough building engagement to justify the 95%, and therefore we get authority to proceed. So it's complicated, to say the least.
Yeah, that's,
If you ever saw the way they calculate this in the process, it's about as detailed as you can imagine.
so, but I think we're in a good position. I will say, many of the projects are, are challenged by, the needs outweighing the maximum cost allowance. I think for Wilson, we're in a pretty good position. We're gonna confirm that with state ed. So I don't see any red flags today to report on that. I think we're well within the 95% requirement. Really, the issue is the estimate is higher than the allocated budget. The allocated budget is well below the 95% requirement.
You mentioned a few minutes ago about being over the budget, reconciling the numbers. 8 months, a year from now, I mean, right now, we're looking at this tariff. I mean, whether it's aluminum or wood or whatever. Yeah, I understand that contingency, but
These are all great questions. I know Rob probably has some, but I'll just say that the construction manager that did the schematic design estimate, in this case, Chase Construction, in our experience is one of the best. There are many good ones. So very fortunate in Rochester to have many good ones. They're thinking about that. You can only use the best information you have at the time. And it seems like the information we had this morning is different than the information we had yesterday, is different than the information we'll have tomorrow. They do have a factor for market adjustment. I think that's very important. So in addition to kind of standard contingencies that I would think about, our construction manager is advising a market adjustment contingency. I don't know, Rob, were there other thoughts you had on that?
No, I think you covered it pretty thoroughly, actually. The estimates we're currently looking at, of course, have contingencies for further design development, which is yet to come. So we expect increases and have encumbrances against our budgets right now for what we consider to be the more standard types of project development cost escalations. However, there is a market piece in there that may or may not be sufficient for what we encounter in the future. But certainly in real time, we'll address that as we further develop the estimates. And in this unique project, in terms of frequency of the estimates, we do another estimate at 25%, which is our next step, 50%, 75%. So we're constantly checking the pulse of our budget against the design development. So if we do need to make adjustments down the road for any changes in the market, we should have adequate information to do that before we hit the street. So that's generally how it.
Yeah, and one of the issues we have that again is a little bit unique to this project is there's a lot of levels of approval necessary here and a lot of process goes on. That means this is not going to get done quickly no matter what you do. And so your ability to pounce on a particular point in time to control your costs are limited. Included in that is you would be, if you were in this in a different set of circumstances, you would probably be trying to buy some of this HVAC equipment in advance. In other words, cut off the escalation. But that's not possible, unfortunately, under our system. And so we're going to have to do the best we can with the estimate. But the sooner we get, this thing bid, the better. I think everybody feels that way. None of us are looking at these numbers to go down right now.
All good questions, and I would, say at every step of the way, we and everyone involved with keeping this project on track should be asking those questions. I personally have high confidence in the attention that the construction manager on this project is giving to it, and they're not shy about letting us know if something's coming up down the road. They tell us where they're factoring that. So I think they've been giving sound estimating advice. We're going to continue to do that, and as Rob said, we'll be back in front of you in just a couple of months talking about the next estimate. A couple months after, they're talking about the next estimate. So we have, multiple chances for a course adjustment. It does happen now that we need a course adjustment right now. It's being worked on very diligently. I think some great collaboration and ideas have come from all facets of the project. And I imagine we'll be very close to moving into the next phase very quickly. Any other questions about that? So schematic design, budget status going forward. I imagine as these decisions are made in interim reports. That's absolutely.
Oh, Mr. Gator, one other thing that you should keep your eye on. As policy, we're also, on the flip side, once we get into construction, we're also carrying a 10% contingency that can't be touched except for by the board.
Okay. So on the next slide, you'll see, I think, the schedule. We talked about that submission to state ed occurring, as soon as we have this reconciled budget. There's a schedule for 25, 50, 75% construction documents with estimates at each step of the way. Kind of the zooming out to the big picture, the final submission to state ed is, the one that happens before the project goes to bid, is scheduled for February of 2026, with a award of construction contracts scheduled for May of 2026. So as Chairman Richards indicated, it does take a while to get through this process. We will know so much more in May of 2026 than we know today. But the team that's doing the planning, the team that's looking over the work we do, I think is making sure that we are focused both on and delivering a great outcome, as well as never forgetting that this project has a budget that we're working with. So with that, if there are any other questions?
Questions or comments for Steve? Anybody online? Hearing nothing? There's a resolution in the packet that was circulated to you as part of the material for this meeting, where we approve the schematic design that's being proposed, so we can go on to the next step. Any comments? We need a motion to approve it then? And moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Covered. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Chairman,
A lot of work here. Okay, the next item here is some work we need to do with respect to fund transfer to support the Edison project. Kevin, you gonna lead us through the first part of this at least?
Sir, as far as the funds, since the beginning of phase one, the school districts have been interested in restoring and expanding the Edison playfield towards a multi-purpose complex for regulation size events. Other priorities obviously got in the way. If you remember, the structural remediation work was the priority for the modernization program, and other priorities included the programming that Rolly and the team have been working on. So the RJSCB and the consultants were asked by the district to evaluate the functionality of the site and prepare a mini master plan for the athletic fields with 3 options for consideration. And Kim, if you could maybe pull up that presentation for us. Rick will walk us through those 3 options that were prepared by the team here, Rolly, Rick, and the Watts team. You'll see that originally, you guys ready? So Rick.
I think, Pepin, you were gonna say originally the charts in the board packet. Yeah, they little bit of a glitch on one of them.
Right.
And we tried to rectify that, but we can't pull the
Yeah,
charts.
well,
up.
that's okay. We'll explain it. And that's, he's speaking to the comment you made, Chairman Richards, earlier, as far as the difference between the low priority and the medium priority. That change was actually a 6-lane to an 8-lane. That's the only change. Everything else is the same. You can
Test me
explain.
how many people caught that.
Well,
There was no difference between the two, except money. There was money.
Right, there was money.
Of course. Okay, go ahead.
we'll talk about a mini master plan that was done to the Edison Fields. And just want to just give you a little background on what we have currently. The 6-lane running track. And this is not really regulation except for the length of the track itself. The pole vault area is not the standard. It's not as safe as it should be. Grading and drainage is poor. I think that's a known condition for anything over at Edison has been a problem for years. No restroom facilities are available. This is a long-standing comment that has come up ever since probably November of 2022 when we did a community engagement for the phase 3 schools. Bleachers, perimeter fencing, if you've ever looked at them, they're in a little bit tough shape. Especially the fencing. The tennis courts out on the north side of the school, a lot of the tennis courts are being used for storage. Dry storage, football. And of course, after we got done with Monroe High School, after Franklin or Medea High School was redone, this certainly fails in comparison to its athletic fields. So, came up working with what architecture and engineering, came up with some, next slide please, some 3 estimates we wanted to present to you. And the first was really a very much a short-term estimate, replacing the 6-lane track. So essentially just replacing the surfaces of the track. There would be no digging, no drainage, no anything like that. We would replace the field event surfaces for the long jump and the high jump. Again, there would be in kind, there wouldn't be anything done in terms of movement of those or enhancing. Replace the chain link fence. Also replace some asphalt in the spectator area, which is underneath the bleachers. Install a more regulation pole vault area, but it would be essentially in the same place that it is now. And then provide some modest regrading to the soil and doing topsoil seeding, things of that nature. The second estimate was, actually it's not shown on here, it says replace a 6-lane track. That is a mistake. The change in the cost for this option would be the change to an 8-lane track. So a new 8-lane track would come into bear here, which would also involve then you have to actually be physically doing construction work, site work, replace that track. Also too, there would be the field event services as we had before would be replaced, chain link fence as well, the asphalt, the bleacher area. The pole vault area would be enhanced a little bit, half of that, and there would be modest regrading for aeration, topsoil and seeding. But I want to make a point that with the 8-lane track as well, you would also have drainage that would have to be installed in a bioretention pit. It would have to be installed to accept the rainwater as it is drawn off in the field, which are expensive items, especially when you start to dig into that landfill surface, because you have to go through testing. You have to get rid of the dirt that you remove and debris that's in it. So it's not an inexpensive process. So the difference between, roughly here, the $3 million, it adds up pretty quickly when you get into the site. The next option is the one that we would prefer for consideration. That's the long-term estimates. Next slide, please. This would be replacing the 8-lane the 6-lane track with the 8-lane surface. I got it right on the slide. And, we would also install a new synthetic turf and multi-sports field within the track area. So you'd have not only the track, but you'd have the surfaces within the track that you replaced also, so you wouldn't have turf in there anymore. You'd have to have enhanced drainage from what you get in the second option here. You'd have to install drainage beneath the track and the football fields, which would be in the interior of the track. And you'd have actually a larger, actually 2 bioretention pits installed as well on the west side of the field. There'd be extensive regrading, so it wouldn't be just going over and fixing up. This would be pretty extensive to have to be done. The field event surfaces would be replaced as well, as we mentioned before. The pole vault area would actually be relocated. You would have the field event surfaces would be replaced, but they would actually be moved a little bit because the track is now wider. You have to physically move in the area that they are currently. And the regulation pole vault area would have to be actually relocated outside the track. Lighting for track and field events to enable nighttime users to be installed. Eliminate perimeter fence, the bleachers would be replaced, and then you would have to reorient the soft and hardball fields. And Rolly had come up with a good design to reorient them, gaining natural light through visibility. And to top everything off, we would have the restrooms, concession stand, and storage facilities would be installed. Next slide, please. So the path forward. I'll let Pepper talk a bit about this. We are requesting at this point in time to go and pursue the long-term option. This would mean a budget transfer would have to be done. And that budget transfer would essentially have to end up changing your financial plan to accept it, but would transfer $16 million of the East project, plus $2 million in reserve for environmental concerns to the Edison project. And then you have to also amend the contract with the architect, because there would be an additional scope of work for them to do. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so the board chairman asked me to explain what East is not getting. Obviously, the original plan had programming and light renovations of the Performing Arts Center at East. So that's not going to be done in this phase. We're going to focus more on the infrastructure, especially in the crawl space where we had some piping failure in phase 2 that need to be addressed in phase 3. Obviously, this option requires extensive soil remediation. Everybody here knows the history of the Edison Tech site, and Jess is smiling. It will require stabilization of and replacement of soils that are in place inside of soil with borrow materials to reconstruct the new facilities. And really did some work with Watts as far as the what's needed in terms of earthwork. The only other exposure is if New York State DEC requires additional remediation during construction for unforeseen conditions that we didn't know during the planning and design phase. So again, we will focus on the crawl space for East. The district will obviously come up with a plan to deal with renovation of the performing arts later. So as Rick mentioned, the original budget for Edison was 86.7 million. With the 16 million transfer, it will be revised to 102.7. And for East, with the reduction, it goes from 42.5 million to 26.5. If there are any other questions, we can certainly answer them right now. Mr. Chairman, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think we need to address here that, some considerable amount of work with respect to the environmental issue. There's no way to completely isolate this issue because it was a landfill that was, surrounded Edison, really. So there's been work done over the years to monitor this and to follow this process. And we hired engineers to do a study to see if this is possible. So some of the design issues that you discussed here, for instance, using artificial surface as opposed to a grass surface, so you effectively cap it. But that remains a risk in the sense that when we go to do the actual work, it's conceivable that the regulators will decide we have to do more here than we projected to make. But I don't want you to think we're just going into this blind. We spent a fair amount of time and money on it already. We spent a fair amount of time and effort to both find out what's there, and a lot of that had been done already, and then to design something that accommodates that fact. But Edison is due, and I think it's time to make a decision here. If we're unwilling to make this kind of commitment, and we still want to provide the kind of facilities to Edison that are available at the other high school, we're either going to have to do it here or we're going to press them somewhere and change the whole approach to this. I don't think any of us want to do that, so we want to work a little harder on it, which is one of the reasons why the maximum solution here gets approved. The other thing is, I don't want you to think this is necessarily the facilities modernization project pushing this. This is what the district wants. This is their decision, all of it, not ours. And what we're doing here is accommodating what they want and what they think is important. Jacob, you might want to address that as well, as a former principal of Edison High School.
Absolutely. Former principal, actually an alum as well. Facility, I would have to just echo, I think it is overdue. Certain location, one that can service, of course, the students, RJSCB also, well, at that particular location. So I'm all for it. Not that I'm quiet about it. I think anyone that knows me knows that this is something that's near and dear, but all the buildings are near and dear, but I do think at this point in time, especially if we have the opportunity to proceed and look into upgrading this particular area of the facility, I think it's time. I think it's time.
Yeah, so both, sorry.
Well, one of the things we have found out with this facilities modernization project through all the phases, it does make a difference. Monroe High School is a perfect example of that. I brag about it all the time. Monroe High School had no real gym facility that you could have a competitive thing in. They certainly had no outside recreational area where you could do anything. All of those things were done in the facilities modernization, and bingo, they're competitive. They're running around beating teams all over the county. And before that, nothing. So it matters what you give the kids. It matters what kind of facilities you have. And this will be the only one on the west side, I think, because all the others just happen to be on the east side, because that's where the high schools are. But anyway, yes, Pepin,
Rolly was itching to say what you just said as far as being the only one on the
Well, I'm glad
west
it's
side.
stolen from me.
So, yes, Mr. Scott and Jesse have been on my case since the beginning of phase one to do something at Edison for the play field. So I personally, I'm glad, the board is considering this. Towards the end of the presentation, Kim, there are a few more supporting slides that we included in the presentation, just to emphasize what Chairman Richard had said in terms of investigative work and testing that was done in the past. This one is showing the borings and well locations where the district and the city have been monitoring of the site. The next one is a boring with the very next one support the presentation that Rick Stofel and Tim have done. Rolly, anything else you want to add here?
No, I think in the board packet, preferred layout is provided, and we will of necessity with a track. And I think there is a detail on the track that many people overlook. The track in its current configuration is non-regulation, which is to say it's got excessively long runways, but the curves are too tight. So our students practicing, for example, the 400-meter hurdles, they aren't training for what they will have to compete in the sectionals, states, Empire Games, et cetera, because their facility just isn't regulation in terms of layout. Now, when you go 8 lanes, they're also wider, and it displaces the softball and baseball field, but we are putting them in a way that not only do we respect the sun in terms of not having sunlight in a batter's face, we've done the field such that they overlap and allow for a boys and a girls team practice field. So it's been very meticulously reconfigured, because if you're going to spend that kind of money, it needs to be generational.
And the next slide, Kim, is a memo to the board making the request. You can see that, it's in your packet. And the very next one is the MCA calculation. Steve Rebels mentioned that earlier as the request of Chairman Richards, and how the building aid units are calculated and how they fit into the cost allowances that SCD will ultimately approve. You can see this was reviewed with the financial advisor, and bottom right, there is no impact on the aid side of this transfer. There's similarly no impact on the debt side, since you are borrowing the same amount of money in different tranches when you go to market for the long-term debt issuance. So in this particular example, Steve, if you want to jump in, well, he's busy, and explain how we calculate the aid. He mentioned K6 is considered that's their elementary, 7 to 12 is their high school. You'll see 5,888 BAUs, building aid units. That's what they call the students, and 780 for special ed. And that calculation needed to be done to estimate the cost allowance for that particular project, multiplied by a regional cost index that Steve mentioned earlier. And in this case, we are using the July 2020 index that changes over time. The state gives you $1 for each of the classification of BAUs, which gives us a cost allowance for construction of 109,823, and an incidental allowance of 3,420,027. That's pretty much it for.
That's that third step I was talking about. You know, when we do work on these projects, we not only have to design and we have to get budget numbers, but we also have to make sure we're gonna get reimbursed. Fortunately, in the high schools, there's money available to do that. So it's gonna work. I can personally testify to the need for the bathrooms. One of my grandsons played football out there last year, and my wife had to go to the bathroom. And I think she walked to the school from the field there, because that's what I think you have to do, isn't it? I thought she'd walked home, to tell you the truth. She was gone so long. But you'll appreciate it. Okay, other questions or comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution in the packet.
I'm sorry, Tom. This is Kabute from the city of Rochester. I have a question about, it's more of a process question. Now, we're all very familiar with the groundwork over at Edison. In terms of process, what is, should they get into the ground and find that the environmentals is a little worse off than they had projected? Does it come back to the board if additional funding is needed for that site work?
Yeah, two things. One, we have done borings already.
Okay.
So that was part of the testing that we paid for already that I referred to. I should have said that. So this is, we're not guessing entirely here, but the issue probably is more a regulatory issue. In other words, the DEC imposes a standard on us that is somehow tougher than what we've opposed already. But The answer to the other question is, yeah, if we come to a point of having to approve a change order, it'll come back to the board and you'll have to vote on it. We haven't done any of that yet because we haven't had any change orders. We're in the very beginning of the process, but that will come here.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments? Seeing or hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
I'm over it.
Yeah, you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that finishes the active business that we have, but we've got a couple of items to report. Starting with the ICO.
Good afternoon. So the analysis of the January work hours are as follows. We had a total of, so far on the project, 19,015 hours that have been worked on it. We're now at 100% of all hours recorded in all the supporting documentation going back to October of 22. We had a couple of subcontractors folks we were working with to get that. So when you notice in your report that it says prior period submission of 2,323 hours, those were hours that were worked prior to January, and we just got the compliance documentation in. So we're now at 100% from October of 23 up through January. So the totals break down as follows. Minority hours worked during the month of January, 751. Non-minority women hours worked, 304. Non-minority male hours worked, 1,019, for total hours during the month of January that will work 2,075 hours. We're down to look at how that breaks out our comparison of goals to overall hours worked. Minority, both male and female, we have a goal of 23%, and we are at 51.09. Women, non-minority only, we have a goal of 7%, and we're at 6.07. Then if we compare goals overall hours worked with female participation analysis, we look at it minority male only, goal of 23%, and we're at 35. Women, non-minority and minority, we have a goal of 7, and we're at 22%. We get down to our business utilization numbers. We have a total contracts that have been awarded of 58,093,000. We are currently at, on our MBE, we are at 35% versus a goal of 18. Our WBE, we're at 5% versus a goal of 12. Our SBE, we're at 4.57 versus a goal of 2. Our DBE, we're at 0.76 versus a goal of 2. We also had 6 Rochester residents who worked on the project during the month of January, a total workforce of 62 individuals. Any questions? Thank you.
Kim, fund balance report.
Thank you, Chairman Richards. We're starting with the budget tracking for fiscal year 2024-25 for the RJSCB budget. This particular document tracks just this fiscal year expenditures against what the board lost in July. And we are currently at $106,590.75 against a budget of $156,000 for Anshin. $64,396.50 against a budget of $156,000 for BSK. The two sums here represent the totals that will not be changing for the audit and the insurance for the board. And then we're at $2,654,331.26 against a budget of $3,462 for Savin. And then the last column, we have Landsman, which also won't be changing, and Sage. since those are currently paid, and that was $9,984.34 against a budget of $6,783.85. The difference with this particular chart is, again, it is tracking just the fiscal year. You'll see on this next chart, we are tracking year to date, or excuse me, from the beginning of the project to date. So just as a refresher for the charts, we had a disbursement on February 6th of $2 million. That brought the phase 3 account balance to $1,284,178.32. The current pay requisition, once that's subtracted, will leave a balance of $288,167.02. We have currently expended $8,177,178, and that leaves a remaining balance of $31,062,822. The RJSCB held funds, again, those are funds from the Attorney General that are being held as discretionary funds for the board. There are no expenditures against that right now, so the balance is $330,648. RJSCB only expenses are the two expenses we discussed for Lawley Insurance and the audit. So this number will not change, $17,986. The RSMP admin expenses are the three vendors that are currently signed for by the board chair. That is Savin, BSK, and Anshin. And we have a current expenditure of 11%, totaling $4,624,382. And all remaining soft costs right now are 1%, $3,534,810. That chart again will change once we start hard construction costs. We will separate those from the soft costs. Any questions?
Yeah, it's early in the project here to draw much conclusion from this, obviously. And that's also true with respect to the ICO's report, but, you know, we need to keep track of it. We need to keep track of it, and it will become important as we get farther along in the project. Okay. Kevin, project manager's report.
Sir. So, as Kim just reported, there are no hard costs expended to date. As of last month, 7.30% of the total incidental budget was spent for the $8,177,178 paid to date, as Kim mentioned earlier. With the current progress, the overall phase 3 program is 1.72% complete. So we have ways to go. We have 98.28% to go towards the end of 2031. The next item is the SCD submission updates. The revised financial plan that was resubmitted to the Controller's Office last November will be revised again to reflect the fund transfer the board just authorized today, which still needs to go to the school district for approval by the school district. But once that's done, we'll revise the financial plan and resubmit the document to the state controller and SED. The schematic design documents were submitted to SED for 2 months ago for MLK school number 9, along with the program verification report for Wilson and Padilla at Franklin. We received the signed ISR from the regional associate. That's the instructional space review that Steve Rebel mentioned earlier. The signed documents and preliminary submission forms were FedExed by Rick Stofel earlier this month to Mike Kosar at SED. We're hoping that that submission will be logged in the system as soon as possible to stop the clock. And Mr. Scott and I will follow up with Mr. Kosar on where we are in terms of approval of the schematic submission package that was made. For Wilson, the schematic design submission was originally slated for February 27th. But there are two reasons that did not occur. One of them, the project was significantly over budget, and this team worked really hard with the architect, and that was mentioned earlier by Steve Rebels and Rob, to bring that $12 million down. And I think there was a meeting just before this board meeting with Mr. Scott to do the reconciliation, and we made significant progress. Want to talk about that?
I certainly believe. Do I want to talk about it or not? It's still to be continued, but yes, it's been reported that we were approximately $12 million over budget. We identified over $14.5 million of potential cost, base scope cost, reduction savings. We're going through that line by line because it has to also align with what the district feels are priorities. And we do see light at the end of the tunnel that we will get to a reconciliation that satisfies the district's priorities.
Yeah, and that's an effort that's been ongoing over the past 2 weeks with everyone, including the district's facilities department. They've provided input, and hopefully there's buy-in on those cost reductions, and we'll be able to move forward significantly. So once we're back on budget, we also need the signed ISR form from the regional associate. We will work with Mr. Scott on getting that form back, because SCD won't accept our schematic submissions without all the forms being signed, including the one being signed by not only the superintendent, Dr. DeMario Strickland, but from the regional associate, also from SCD. But once that's done, they'll send an approval to the school district to Dr. Strickland for approval of the ISR. We're still waiting for SCD to accept a meeting to review their standard preliminary submission requirements. So once that's set, we'll make people available to go over their processes to make the program run much smoother. As far as design status, School 9, again, we talked about the 25% design is complete and ready for legislative commission, and Terry will go through a schedule a little bit later. The Chase completed their pricing of the 25% progress set, and a summary of the estimate will have to be sent to SCD this Friday. Terry will have to develop some sort of format to make sure they're happy with how we're reporting those costs. The swing space test fit is being updated based on review and comments we received from the district's facilities departments. Wilson design, there was a presentation, so we know where we are. We got to talk about Jefferson as a swing space. The test fit is done, and there's going to be more to talk about based on decisions by the district. Padilla School at Franklin, schematic design will be completed this week, and then it will go to cost estimating and reconciliation to make sure we're on budget. There were design review sessions with individual user groups. One was done last week with, was it Brian, art department? 3.
On Thursday, science
And CTE was done as well.
was done on Friday.
Good. So that's on the way. Edison Tech user group and key stakeholder meeting input ongoing. There was a joint kickoff meeting with the architects, the construction manager, Buffalo Construction, the architect CJS, and the school district. 3D scanning of the building testing. Don't know if that got started yet. That started. Okay, so that's ongoing. Okay, good. So the structural evaluation by SGH, the field work is done. Preliminary findings and recommendations will be shared with us tomorrow. I need to dig up some historical pictures for them that Rick and Brian asked. So once we do that, we'll have a report ready this week that shows their findings. The mini campus plan we talked about that was presented. As far as procurement of professional services, Douglas and East are left. Both RFPs are in preparation. So once we're ready for the board to authorize us to release those, we will do so. Regarding the project labor agreement, the PLA, there's an introductory meeting scheduled with the Rochester Construction Council leadership with Chairman Richards. It's a meet and greet only for now prior to reviewing a draft agreement. And we will need the board to give us a go, no go decision at next month's meeting in order to include language in the front end specifications being developed for the contractor bids. Terry, if you could give a high level update on the schedule, please.
Again, the updated schedule is up on the wall with a data date of March 1st. The highlights really is what we've mentioned. Wilson was originally scheduled to be submitted on February 27th. When I did the update on the 1st, I assumed that we would get through value engineering and budget reconciliation in order to get the package ready to get in by March 17th. Depending on some of the discussions, we need to meet with the architect and figure out if packages ready by then, or if a little more design needs to develop, get them back to schematic level once the decisions on the scope and the budget are finalized. You can see that it will be within the short term in the SED. Padilla, we actually received the schematic package from the architect last week. It went to the estimators. They're going through the drawings and the specifications now. We actually have a walkthrough scheduled for this Thursday afternoon with the estimators within the building for them as they're doing their own. Those are the biggest highlights, Kevin.
Sure. Any questions for Terry? As far as order items, we've shared the RJSCB and our team shared several documents with school district's finance department to make a decision on an opportunity to refund the callable serial bonds that are becoming due. And that would extract savings from the bonds that are due on May 1st, starting this May or later. Last week, I shared with district an updated analysis prepared by Wells Fargo and myself. We trust the district is starting the legislative process in this legislative session to take advantage of those savings. Again, this was done for Buffalo and Syracuse. It saves some money. I think I shared the document with you also, Mr. Scott. Unless legislation is in place for the refunding the outstanding bonds, the savings are retained by New York State. Under the provisions of the law, the RJSCB can refund any outstanding debts as long as this legislation is passed and is in place for with a waiver request for the 10-year reset. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, anything else you want to add?
Other questions or items for Kevin? Seeing or hearing none. Other items of business to come before us, so. Again, seeing or hearing none, and adjourn. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.